What we have here is Detective Comics number 1090, 1090. It came out on October 23rd, 2024. And I just bought it yesterday in time of recording. And I just read it yesterday and then read it again this morning because I knew I wanted to do a review of it. I've been buying Detective Comics for about a year now, and I have reviewed a few previous issues during Ram V's run on this series on my YouTube channel. I had also recently reviewed the other All In. This is the first issue of the new All In series with the new creative team. And I had previously reviewed on this channel Batman 153, which came out earlier in October. Which was also the first issue of the All In. I actually liked Detective Comics 1090 more than Batman 153. And if you saw my video for Batman 153, you saw that I had a positive reaction to that this issue. And so this one I liked even more. And I did like it more than the past few issues of Detective Comics. Ram V's run, the Gotham Nocturne Opera, or whatever it was called, after a while, it became a bit much. It was, you just kind of wanted it to wrap up because it was going on and on. And he has a very kind of, at least for that series, that story arc, he had a very pretentious type of writing style. You had, Batman like out of commission for some issues, like he would be in jail or in the desert or being hung or so forth. And then it was like he was wearing a weird costume. It just kind of got a bit strange. So if you've been staying away for Detective Comics because of that, this is a good all-in jumping on point. It was written by a new creative team, written by Tom Taylor, drawn and colored by Mikhail Hanin, is how his name is pronounced. I looked on YouTube to see previous interviews with him and things like that. Because I've seen other YouTubers like pronounce his name Michael and things like that, but apparently it's Mikhail Hanin. He does an awesome job on this issue. In fact, when I first was thinking about what I was going to say about this comic, one of the things I was going to say was that Tom Taylor probably doesn't need to write as tight a script, as tightly plotted a script as this comic is. There's a lot of back and forth. Starts out 3 weeks from now, then you flash back to years ago, then you flash forward. So this beginning of the story actually takes place, in the future. So when the comic ends, you haven't even got to this opening yet. This takes place well ahead of where we're going to end up. So he's kind of writing for the trade here. It'll all make sense when you have 6 issues under your belt of this thing. But I still recommend reading it in real time because it has that sort of, it makes you want to see what's going to happen next. But when I first started thinking of what I was going to say about this comic, I was thinking, Tom Taylor really didn't even need to write such a tightly plotted script because the art is so strong in this issue. And the coloring, Mikhail Hanin has also done art and colors, it says here in the credits. You can just see from the splash page was all in green. The art is so strong. Tom Taylor could have just done a Batman versus the Penguin story, and it still would have been awesome. So he didn't even need to do all this stuff that he's doing in here. The art would have carried the comic alone, so he could have just done a traditional standard Batman story. It would have been just as good or even better than what he's come up with. But, he probably doesn't know, exactly who's always going to be drawing his stories. So it is a very tightly plotted story. There's a lot of back and forth, like I said, and it delves into Batman's origin in a way. I'll get to that later, but I wanted first to give the praise, but then I wanted to talk about some of the pitfalls or criticisms. But basically what the story is, it starts out, Batman walks into a room, there's a guy bleeding in a chair, and there's this villain who had said he was going to kill this person deserves to die, and he wanted Batman to see that person's death. So the identity of this villain is sort of hidden. We think at first that this villain is going to be a male. We sort of assume that, because of how they're an aggressive serial killer. Usually men are serial killers from what I hear. But I think as things go along, this may actually be a female, but we'll find out. Um, Batman tries to stop the person, and they say, you know, uh, don't make the same mistake as your father did. So they know that Batman is Bruce Wayne. It cuts back to many years ago. Thomas Wayne is trying to catch a few Z's, but he's interrupted and he has to go help in a surgery thing. Dr. Thomas Wayne, who is Batman's father. Batman at the time of this story is like 8 years old in this flashback. And we see Martha Wayne, and there's a woman here who had been in a car accident, and this other doctor says, the guy who, there were two passengers in the car, the woman and the man, but she's going to give birth to a baby, which was prompted by the accident. But the other doctor says to Thomas, maybe the guy doesn't deserve to be helped in surgery because you can tell he had been abusing his wife. So, but Thomas, of course, is going to save the guy. So that is a strong story plot in this whole thing, that Batman, like his father, always saves people. He doesn't he's not judge, jury, and executioner. He's always the person that is just trying to stop people from being hurt. And he tries to help them. So that's what he gets from his father. Anyway, Martha Wayne takes the child and the mother and is going to keep them away from this abusive man through the Wayne Foundation or whatever. And Bruce overhears this conversation about how his father, Martha is saying, why did you save that man? And he's like, well, I don't have a choice, blah, blah, blah. I'm a doctor. And he impresses upon this to his son, Bruce, 8 years old, that if we can save a life and we don't, what would that make us? Well, of course, it would make you a killer, which is who they're trying to stop. Now it jumps back to the present day. So this is before 3 weeks from now. So this is still the future. So like I said, we won't even get to this part even when the comic ends. So now we've jumped back to the present day. Batman here's a gunshot. Now this is the part that sort of seems like it's Tom Taylor has very tightly wound the story. It almost feels a little manipulative because here's a gunshot. This 17-year-old boy has shot this person, but he didn't mean to shoot the person, at the store. And so he's going to call an ambulance. But Batman bursts in, sees the kid with the gun, and punches him. Down here you can see he punches the kid. So the kid, even though it says 911, what's your emergency? Batman goes to help the wounded guy first while the kid runs off. He was so scared by Batman, but Batman says, well, I can trace him later. He has a little bat thing, like a spider tracer on the kid. So he's going to track him later without realizing that somebody else is tracking the kid too. This hand here is the serial killer who's going around killing criminals. So he's sort of like Batman, but judge, jury, and executioner. So this is like who Batman would be if Batman just thought, oh, these people, their lives are not worth saving. Now, it's a little contrived here, like I said, because Batman later ends up in the story sort of blaming himself for having hit the kid at this moment, which scared the kid, caused him to run off, which ultimately ends up having the kid get killed by this vigilante person. But if you start to, I read the story twice, and even though it is tightly plotted, you can still kind of see it feels a little manipulative by Tom Taylor, because Batman himself, even if he hadn't punched the kid, him coming through the window dressed like a bat, his very appearance was designed to scare criminals. So most likely the kid would have gotten scared anyways and ran off. And that's really not Batman's fault. And Batman should feel no guilt whatsoever because he didn't kill this kid. And plus, the kid did shoot somebody. So he would have ended up back in, in juvenile detention or whatever. Anyways, so there is a little sequence here where Barbara Gordon is saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be tracking him because he's a lot younger and faster than you are. Um, you've had more knee surgery replacements or whatever than this kid," and so on. So it sort of emphasizes Batman's age at this point, which will come into play later in the story. Almost like when James Bond in Skyfall, where it sort of emphasized, "Oh, James, you're getting older," and things like that. But in the purpose of this, that sort of premature aging of the main character in this story, the purpose of setting that up is explained later in the story. Anyways, we see the body of the kid who's dead, and this is part of a pattern that there's been like 9 other people who have died. Now, Bruce Wayne goes to a party, and he is there for Scarlet Martha Scott, who is running the party. Scarlet Martha Scott, this young woman who's a little younger than him, she is the daughter, presumably. A lot of this isn't explained too well. You have to kind of suss it out. But that's her when she was a baby. She was the daughter of the abused woman. And we know that because in this panel here, Thomas says, "Evelyn Scott, this is Martha." So Scott is her last name. And here's the thing, by the way. I'm not going to reveal the last page of the story because that's a big spoiler and it will sort of ruin the surprise. Once you piece all this together, you can see where this is going. But I will say that presumably, I don't know this for sure, presumably the Scarlet Martha Scott is the person that is going around killing, the vigilante who's going around killing these criminals. That's my suspicion. Don't know for sure. But that seems to be how things are being set up. Anyways, because of her talking about later in here that some lives are worth more than others, she's set up this thing where people can sort of regain their youth. So these are some old money billionaires. It seems sort of judgmental in a way, the way it's written that way, or perhaps ironic as old money, but they're sort of more youthful now because they've been taking this drug that she has invented or whatever. By the way, you can really tell Michael Hanning's art with his coloring like really pops here because like her lips aren't actually like inked in, they're like colored in, so it makes it look really much more natural. So his coloring here is fantastic. It sort of makes me wonder if he can maintain this. Hopefully he'll be able to do the whole story arc. Say if this lasts 6 issues or something like that, hopefully he will be able to do both the penciling, inking, and the coloring, which would be awesome. He's able to maintain this quality because it looks really nice. Anyways, so when presented with this opportunity to take this drug that will make him more youthful, Bruce Wayne is tempted, but he's not sure. So the way the story is written, it's sort of making this more tempting to Bruce than it otherwise would have. Because perhaps he could have saved a life if he'd been faster. I'm not going to show the rest of this because there's like one more page after this and we'll reveal one final surprise. And I don't want to spoil it. I do want you to buy this comic. It's $4.99. Like I said, I found it much more enjoyable than Batman 153 overall. The art is better. Now Batman 153 is more of a Batman story, whereas this is more of a characterization story. So if you're looking for a Batman superhero story, Batman 153 may be the way to go, instead of this Detective 190. Because this is much more of a characterization story. You have all these pages with Thomas Wayne. If you're not interested in Batman's psychological history and things like that, stick with Batman 153 instead. So now I do have a couple criticisms. like I said, overall, I think this is probably a 9 out of 10 or something like that. Really good issue, worth the $5. There is one criticism I have is that unlike most issues of Detective Comics, which are 30 pages of story for $4.99, usually it'd be like 20-page lead story and then a 10-page backup story. And sometimes the backup was sort of integrated in with the main story, but it was still, the page counts all worked out. So you were getting, more pages for your money. Well, lately, some of the DC comics and even Marvel comics have been $4.99, but you're getting only like 22 pages, which is the case with this one. You're getting 22 pages of story, plus there's a little 4-page wrestling backup, similar to the Batman one that was in here, where there was a. Oops, I didn't mean to show that spoiler, but similar to like that wrestling ad, sort of an ad for a TV show or something like that. I don't know what it is. You get something similar in this one. But anyways, so I didn't like that there were fewer pages. If there had been, 8 more pages, it would have been even more awesome. Now, on the positive side, however, it does take a long time to read this issue. There is like a lot of tiny words, tiny lettering, a lot of talking. So you get your money's worth. It probably took just as long to read this as it would have taken to read a Ram V, 30-page story. So that's one drawback to it. The other drawback to it, like I said, it seems a little more manipulative because, like, for example, when the other doctor comes into him and says, wakes him up, and then sort of says, gee, do you really want to operate on the dad? Because he's an abuser. It's like, well, if you didn't want him to do it, why not? Why did you even wake him up to begin with to go do it? Also, you can just tell at a glance that she's been abused. Okay, so let's let the guy die because we just made a snap judgment about they were being abused. I saw a I Love Lucy episode recently. It was on I Love Lucy, and there was the whole plot of it was that it looked like Lucy had been abused because she had a black eye, and it was like she got hit by a book or something like that. And so, you can assume just by, she, I'm looking through the door. I haven't even looked at her. Oh yeah, she's been abused by her husband. Let's let the guy die. I think that's her husband. I don't know if they're married, but I just assumed they were. But so that seemed like a little manipulative on the writer's part, and just the way everything sort of happens like clockwork, almost like people are chess pieces. The characters are chess pieces that he's moving around. So you feel a little manipulated, especially like when the kid, I didn't mean to shoot you, even though I'm trying to rob you or whatever. Oh, now I'm going to call the police. Oh, now Batman hit me, so now I'm going to run. Now I get killed. A lot of this just is so manipulative of everything's working exactly how the writer wants it to work to elicit a certain response from the reader. So that can be a little annoying. The other thing too is I would caution Tom Taylor to get too much into rewriting the history of Batman's legend. The legend is like the origin story. The 2-page legend, I think it was in an early issue of Detective Comics, or it was in Batman #1 in 1940, where, Batman is, parents are killed, he becomes the Batman. When you start going back and, which writers have done in the past, Thomas Wayne was really a superhero. He dressed as a bat too. You start adding more layers of the stuff, it just gets a little ridiculous. I'm reminded in Captain America comics in the late 70s, they had the Ameridroid storyline. It was like around Captain America #220, because they wanted to solve some thing that happened between like in Avengers #4 when Captain America and Bucky, Bucky dies on this rocket, and then Captain America says, I hit the waters of Newfoundland. And then Roy Thomas had to explain, well, why was he saying Newfoundland? So he inserted this whole story that happened between Bucky's death on that rocket and when the Avengers picked him, up in an ice floe, in an iceberg. So, and it was this silly kind of story with his character, the Ameridroid, who was a giant Captain America. It kind of ruined the simplicity, and most people ignore it. Most writers ignore that whole story unless they bring the Ameridroid back, and even then, they sometimes just ignore that, where the Ameridroid came from. So when you go back, you run the risk of you ruin the simplicity and purity of the legend by inserting all these little things. Oh, and this happened that we didn't tell you about before, and it just gets a little silly. So hopefully that does not happen. He doesn't try to remake the origin, and it becomes, it starts adding baggage to it that is unnecessary. I think sometimes writers, they want to add significance. They want their story to be part of the legend or add something of significance to the legend. But really, they run the risk of just mucking things up. They could just tell a good Batman story, and like I said, if Tom Taylor had simply told a Batman versus Penguin story, a Batman versus Riddler story, it would have been fine. It probably would have been just as good as what we have here. But he can sort of impress you with his literary quality of flashbacks and tying things together, almost like he's the Alan Moore, with this little detail. It's almost like you can't take anything out of this story because every little detail adds up to the larger whole. So in that respect, it's impressive, but at the same time, it can get a little too cute, a little too clever, and make the reader feel like it's not natural, that they're being manipulated by a writer who is moving these chess pieces around in a specific, deliberate way to elicit a certain response. Anyway, so if you like that tightly controlled narrative, which I do, I think it works in this issue, then you'll like this. But it does run that risk of kind of making it feel like you're being jerked around by the writer. So, first issue so far of this new run, awesome. I loved it, and I think it's impressive. And like I said, the art carries a lot of the story, even though the story is really good and well written. If it had been drawn by a different artist, I might have had a different reaction. But anyways, kudos to Tom Taylor, Mikhail Khanin for their awesome debut issue on Detective Comics number 1090. That's it for me. Thanks for watching.